أهلا بكم في هذا المحور الأخير المسجل من نبض البلد. نستضيف اليوم الناشط الأمريكي شون كينج، وهو ناشط فاعل داعم للقضية الفلسطينية ويحظى بمتابعة الملايين عبر وسائل التواصل الاجتماعي. شون اختلف عن غيره من الناشطين بأنه أمريكي الأصل، أخذ على عاتقه الاشتباك مع الغرب، ونقصد هنا المجتمع الغربي الذي يستقي المعلومات من إعلام ومؤثرين لا يرون الحقيقة الكاملة. فكان شون لهم بالمرصاد، يكشف زيف الادعاءات ويسلط الضوء على الحقيقة، كل الحقيقة. اليوم وفي ظهوره الأول إعلاميا اختار شون أن يكون هذا اللقاء من خلال قناة عربية قريبة من القضية الفلسطينية. فأهلا بك شون في رؤيا وفي نبض البلد.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
أبدأ بالسؤال بمشاركتنا اللحظة التي قررت فيها البدء بالدفاع عن فلسطين، كيف ولماذا؟
I'm glad you're asking me that question because at the root of why I do what I do is really because some of my best friends are Palestinian. I am not just doing this as a guest or as somebody who doesn't have Palestinians in my life, but because some of my nearest and dearest friends are Palestinian, I've been able to not only learn to care about them and care about their families, but through them, I've really learned about the plight of Palestinian people in Gaza, in the West Bank. And so the root of all of my advocacy for Palestinians, it really starts with something so simple. It's that I have Palestinian friends, and you fight for your friends, you fight for your family, you advocate for your friends. And I think a huge part of why we see the American government struggling to advocate for Palestinians is I think a lot of people in the American government don't know Palestinians, don't have Palestinians in their lives as friends like I do. And so this is very personal for me.
باعتبارك مؤثر في الغرب، ما مدى نجاحك في نقل مآسي المدنيين في غزة اليوم والضفة الغربية وفي فلسطين، كل فلسطين، إلى صناع القرار الغربيين ولمنظمات الإغاثة ومنظمات المجتمع المدني المعنية في هذه الملفات؟
Well, once we saw how horrible the attacks in Gaza were, and we knew that we wouldn't see them on Western media, like I was seeing local Palestinian journalists post some atrocious attacks. What I was saying is I would see the suffering of Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank. I would see it on Instagram or Twitter, but I would never see it on Western media. And part of what I thought my responsibility was to show people here in the United States and my followers around the world what was really happening in Gaza. Because even today, you really don't see that on any news source here in the United States. And so what I hope and believe is that showing this suffering and what we believe is genocide, what we think are war crimes, showing this to the world, we hoped would galvanize the whole world to support Palestinian people and to not only call for a ceasefire, but to call for the people who've committed these atrocities to be held accountable. So we hope that the world sees it and understands it. Now we just need the governments of the world to see it and understand it and hopefully intervene in some meaningful way.
كيف يؤثر كل ذلك في الرأي العام برأيك، وكيف يخدم كل هذا، كل ما تقوم به وتعاملك مع خطاب كراهية ضدك شخصيا، مصلحة القضية الفلسطينية؟
Well, first and foremost, I'm 44 years old, and for most of my life, when we've seen atrocities like this happen, like there was ethnic cleansing in Rwanda or in Bosnia, back then there wasn't social media. There wasn't Instagram or Facebook or Twitter. There weren't cell phones. And so now, really for one of the first times in the history of the world, people are able to document their own suffering. they're able to document these war crimes, document these atrocities, and we're able to share these so that the world really understands what's going on. And in part, it makes me wonder, what would it have looked like had we had cell phones and social media 20 years ago, 30, 40 years ago, to show the world what was really going on? While I get some hate and blowback for what I do, that's nothing to me compared to what Palestinians are suffering through. And so I don't really take much time to think about the negativity that might come my way, or the hate, or sometimes we get death threats. I'm focused so much on what Palestinians are suffering through. Some of my dearest friends in Gaza have lost their families. Several journalists that I'd come to know and really respect have been killed. Aid workers that I knew have been killed. And so it's easy for me to push through whatever negativity might come my way, because it's nothing compared to what Palestinians are dealing with right now.
وسط ارتفاع كبير في عدد متابعيك على منصة انستغرام منذ اندلاع العدوان على غزة، هل يمكنك وصف أشرس النقاشات التي فاجأتك على منصتك بين المؤيدين والمعارضين؟
You know, there have been several moments that I think stand out to me. Over the past almost 40 days now, I've seen 2 or 3 developments that I've never seen in my life. One, I see people who never really understood what it meant to be Palestinian, what it meant to be in an occupied place, that never really understood the politics of why Palestinians are oppressed the way they are. People are finally coming to understand those very basic facts. I think the IQ, the intelligence of people on the Palestinian plight has gone up significantly. Secondly, I'm seeing particularly young Jewish leaders in the United States advocate for Palestinians. Here in the United States, we see protests all over the United States of young Jewish Americans who are saying not only that they want a ceasefire, but that they believe this is genocide, that this is ethnic cleansing. And I think it's caused a lot of people to say, okay, this goes deeper than they thought. If young Jewish Americans are not only fighting for this to end, but fighting for those who have committed these atrocities to be held accountable, it just causes people here in the United States in particular to see it very differently. But lastly, I think the most important thing that's happened is now tens of millions of people are following Palestinian journalists, Palestinian leaders who can speak for themselves. And while it's a huge honor for me to be able to show the world what's happening to Palestinians, I think my favorite development in the midst of so much horror and negativity is that no matter how long this lasts, now there are tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people that are following Palestinians who will be able to get their news directly from them. And that's something that will last, long beyond this current moment.
نعم. سؤال اليوم هناك كثير من المحتوى الذي يقدم للرأي العام الغربي، محتوى باللغة الإنجليزية قادم من الدول العربية كالأردن. هل لاحظت أي تأثير على الرأي العام الغربي لهذا المحتوى؟
Yeah, definitely. Like on my social media, I'm regularly sharing content from not just Roya and from Jordan, but from sources all over the region. And so in the United States, we rarely get news from the region. It normally comes through Western voices, through American voices. And so for us to be able to hear what you have to say, to hear your opinions, We've even been able to hear government officials and leaders, including from there in Jordan. And so to be able to hear what people from the region have to say and how they feel, I think has been indispensable for not just Americans, but all over the world. We've seen protests now in over 100 countries. There have never been that many protests for Palestinians. We've seen protests with millions and millions of people. Even here in the United States, we've had the single largest protest that we've ever had for Palestinians. And it's important for us to not only hear from Palestinians, but to hear from news sources all over the world. And so, we're glad, but the real question is, well, what difference is it making? And our hope is that leaders around the world will eventually refer war crimes to the International Criminal Court. It's not enough to just call them war crimes. We need governments, particularly governments that are a part of the International Criminal Court, to make sure they refer these crimes to the court themselves.
في ذات السياق هناك من حاول التوجه للإعلام الغربي، الحديث مع الإعلام الغربي كثيرا حول ما يحدث في فلسطين، حقيقة ما يحدث في فلسطين. فهل تقرأ أن هذا أمر اليوم بات أساسيا لتغيير وجهة النظر؟ هل ساهم ذلك في تغيير وجهة نظر الغرب لما يدور من أحداث ومن عدوان على غزة؟
Absolutely. I think 2 or 3 things have happened that have fundamentally changed the way the whole world sees this. First and foremost, as I said a moment ago, there are just brilliant, courageous Palestinian journalists in Gaza, in the West Bank, that are documenting what's happening, putting their lives on the line. Over 40 Palestinian journalists have already been killed, which is horrible. I don't know that I've ever heard of that many journalists being murdered. And those journalists, many of them are just 20, 21, 22 years old. These are young men and women who are often in the most dangerous places and positions. Having the world being able to hear from them, to see them, there are Palestinian voices now that the world has come to know and love. I'm seeing people now get nervous when they haven't heard from the Palestinian men and leaders and women and others that they're following, because they know how unsafe it is in Gaza. And so being able to hear from Palestinians directly, being able to see what's happening directly, has had an enormous impact. And what the media from the region has been able to do is to also show the world something very different than what you see here in the United States. And so on an average day, there are more people that view my Instagram page than watch most major American news channels. Yesterday, I had videos that had millions and millions of views, which are more than watch most television shows in the United States. So we've been able to use social media to make sure that people get the right information, that they get it from sources that are trusted. And it's been important for people to hear from Roya and other news outlets on what's actually going on.
في ذات الإطار، هل واجهت أي تهديدات من إسرائيل أو من أنصارها؟ وكيف تتعامل مع مثل هذه المخاطر المحتملة؟
Yes, I think one of the things I learned many years ago, I started advocating for Palestine and Palestinians several years ago. And a lot of my Palestinian friends let me know right away, Shaun, when you advocate for us, you're always going to be attacked. And it actually instills a lot of fear in people, because you know that in the United States, when you advocate for Palestinians, people will lie and say that you hate Jewish people when you don't. They'll call you anti-Semitic when you aren't. And I've had friends that have lost jobs, that have been threatened. And, thankfully, I'm a very independent person, and I'm able to speak how I want to speak, to advocate how I want to advocate. But for a lot of other people, I've had friends who are doctors and lawyers who've been threatened to lose their jobs just because they're advocating for Palestinians. My family and I, we've received death threats almost every day, but we're safe. I've taken a lot of measures to make sure that I'm safe every day, that my family is safe every day. We've also seen a lot of misinformation, even about me, come from Israel. You'll see on my Instagram page right now, I almost didn't believe it when I first saw it, but members of the Israeli occupying force recorded a video, members of the Israeli army recorded a video saying they were thanking me for a donation I had made to them. And of course, I've never made a donation to the Israeli military, but they were spreading this information all over the place because they wanted people to lose trust and lose confidence. And this was early on. And so this type of misinformation, these types of attacks are frustrating, but we just have to stay focused. We have to understand that we have to be able to endure those attacks. And I think the good news is, I think most of the world now understands that this misinformation is just part of how the Israeli government works. If they can cause people to not trust you, it can destabilize the work. But I don't see people falling for it. I think people are very, very focused and just determined to see a free Palestine, a safe Palestine, a whole Palestine. And, I'm going to stay focused as well.
هل كان التهديد من داخل الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية، من إسرائيليين من إسرائيل مباشرة، من حكومات؟ مصدر التهديد، من كان مصدر التهديد؟
Well, I get regular death threats through email, through direct message, through social media, and sometimes we're able to report them. Most of the time, we can't tell who they're coming from. Certainly, we know that the Israeli government was behind spreading that misinformation about me. These were actual soldiers that filmed a video saying they were thanking me for a donation. I'm sure that they didn't just take that up on their own and decide to do it. Someone probably asked them to do that. It's my job as a leader, as an organizer, to just stay focused, to continue fighting for Palestinians every day, to continue amplifying their voices. I've become so close over the past 5 weeks with local journalists on the ground. I'm always deeply concerned about their own safety. And so whatever threats are coming my way are small in comparison to what Palestinians are dealing with there in Gaza and the West Bank.
حتى اليوم لماذا يركز الإعلاميون في الغرب ومؤسسات التلفزة الغربية على سؤال الضيوف إذا ما كانوا يدينون حماس، ولم يسأل أحد حتى اللحظة لماذا إذا كان ما يدين إسرائيل فيما تفعل؟
Well, I think that's one of the most frustrating things that we've seen. I've seen atrocious interviews with Palestinians. I saw an interview with a Palestinian man who had lost over 20 members of his family who had been killed when his home was bombed. He lost his father, his brothers, his nieces and nephews. So this was a man that was grieving. And the interviewer kept asking him if he condemned Hamas. And it was like, this is a grieving man in front of you. Why would you dare ask him to do that? And it's so frustrating for me because we've seen now, the official numbers are that over 11,000 Palestinians have been killed. We believe that that number is actually significantly higher than that. Nearly 5,000 Palestinian children have been killed. And for people to still be asking anyone to condemn Hamas is extremely frustrating. And a lot of times what we see in the United States, and this is no different than a lot of the world, but the United States, our media often is very much an extension of our government. And so because our American government is in such strong support of Israel, we see that same support in the American media. And so even though we've had over 11,000 Palestinians be killed, over 250,000 Palestinian homes have been completely destroyed. Over 1.5 million Palestinians are homeless right now. It's an astronomical amount of suffering that they've experienced. And so at this point, we need to move way beyond asking someone if they can condemn Hamas. And your question is right. People need to be saying, do you condemn what Israel has done to Palestinians? And while here in the United States, I don't know that we'll ever see the American media take that approach, I am encouraged because all over the world, everyday people, regular people, they see what's going on and they understand it. And while it's taking a long time for the governments of the world to catch up, we see all over the world that people understand what Israel is doing. And there's a point that I want to make that I think is very important. None of this is going to make Israel safer. And I'm just speaking from a practical standpoint. They have caused so much pain, so much suffering, that even if this violence ended today, the pain and suffering and destruction that Israel has caused in Gaza and in the West Bank, I don't know what they expect that pain to do, where they expect that pain to go. And it's not going to make Israel safer. It's not going to make Israelis around the world safer, or Jewish people around the world safer. In fact, these decisions that Israel continues to make every single day to cause so much destruction to Palestinians is already making Jewish people and Israelis around the world much less safe. And so they say they're doing this in self-defense, but I don't think the average person believes that. You don't kill 5,000 children. 1,000 of those are babies, toddlers. You don't do that in self-defense. No one believes this is self-defense. In fact, Israelis themselves say that this is a Nakba. Just yesterday on Israeli media, their Minister of Agriculture openly said that they believe this is the second Nakba. I posted a video of soldiers, Israeli soldiers in Gaza today, saying that their goal is to take over all of Gaza and to resettle it. You don't have to believe me. Listen to what Israelis, including their own government officials, are saying. And so this genocide, these war crimes, they're not going to stop themselves. Someone is going to have to intervene to stop them. If you've ever studied genocide, it never just dies down. It has to be stopped. And my question for the viewers and for the people of Jordan and for the region is, how will we stop this? They won't just choose to stop on their own. And the Palestinian people are counting on us to do everything we can to intervene and help them be safe.
اسمح لي في ذات السياق، وأنت تحدثت بوضوح عن متى تتوقع أن يبدأ الإعلام الغربي بتوجيه هذا السؤال بعد كل ما يتابع من مجازر بحق الشعب الفلسطيني في غزة وفي الضفة الغربية؟
Well, I'm starting to see a slight difference in the American media. A couple weeks ago, the American media never even mentioned the destruction of homes, the forced displacement. The American media was not talking about how many children have been killed, how many families have been destroyed, how many elders and seniors have been killed, how many women and mothers. Now, just over the past few days, I'm starting to see major American news sources start to talk about the suffering that Palestinians are experiencing. They're not saying nearly enough, but I'm starting to see the change, in part because the videos and images that we show in real time of the suffering of Palestinians has influenced the world. I don't know that the American media will call for a ceasefire, will call for justice or accountability. I think that's going to always be up to us, to activists and organizers here in the United States and around the world. But there are big decisions that have to be made. For instance, I have voted in every presidential election for my entire life. I'm 44. I think I voted in 6 or 7 presidential elections. But I could never vote for Joe Biden. At this point in my life, I see Joe Biden as a war criminal. I see the actions he's committed as war crimes. And so many voters in the United States, like myself, they've put us in a horrible position because the people that we would normally support, I could never support them anymore, no matter what they do now. And so we've been put into a horrible position to choose sometimes between 2 candidates that don't have our best interest. And you'll find in the United States, not just Palestinian Americans, not just Muslim Americans, but millions of Americans are so angry with our government right now that we would never vote for them again because of what they've done. It's been heartbreaking because I know many of these leaders, many elected officials that I've helped campaign for, that I helped elect, I feel have made a grave mistake, almost blindly supporting Israel, even after it's abundantly clear to the eyes of the world that what's happening is atrocious. And most American politicians continue to support them, and we'll continue to speak out in any way we can.
نعم. سأعود لحسابك على مواقع التواصل الاجتماعي وأسأل عن انستغرام تحديدا، وسؤال: هل واجهت قيود على حسابك على هذه المنصة مثل تلك القيود المفروض على تحقيق الأرباح أو أي قيود أخرى لأنك تنشر محتوى يعتبر حساس؟
Absolutely. I was permanently banned from TikTok. I hardly used it, and I barely posted anything over there. And me and many of us who were trying to advocate for Palestinians on TikTok were banned from TikTok. I keep thinking that maybe Instagram is going to shut my account down. I've had multiple restrictions on my account, and almost every day I hear from people in Gaza, in the West Bank, whose accounts have been restricted there. Not just journalists, sometimes everyday people who are just posting about these atrocities and have gotten different restrictions and warnings. I've tried to appeal to the people at Facebook and Instagram and Meta to say, hey, we have to be able to document these atrocities, but we continue to face warnings, restrictions. I've seen several people have their accounts closed, or they remove your ability to post live videos. And so I continue to deal with that myself. And I think most of us have just made the decision that we're going to continue to post no matter what. And if that means our accounts are restricted, or even if our accounts are closed, we can't stop showing the atrocities that Palestinians are experiencing, even if the threat is that we might lose our account. I'll just cross that bridge when I get to it. Every day I've been emailing with people at Facebook and Instagram to say, please stop restricting my account, restricting other people's accounts. And we're still there. We're still able to post, but daily we're concerned that this primary lifeline of Palestinians to show the world what they're experiencing, we're afraid that if that's closed, how will the world know what's going on?
كم التنبيهات التي حصلت عليها، وهل تعرف أشخاص حظرت حساباتهم أو قلقون أيضا من حظر الحسابات اليوم نتيجة ما ينشرون وهم في الغرب، لأننا نعتقد أن هذه الخوارزميات تعمل فقط في منطقتنا، أي تغلق الحسابات التابعة للعرب الذين ينشرون هذه المواد التي تعتبرها المنصات حساسة.
Well, I've probably received just myself of 15 to 20 warnings and restrictions. I've had very important posts that I've made, photos that I've shared, videos that I've shared, I've had them removed. I can already tell that they've restricted my accounts in several ways. So for me, it happens almost every day, sometimes several times a day. There have been multiple days where I was afraid that my account was about to be shut down. I've had several friends, close friends of mine, whose accounts were closed down and we had to fight to get them back up. One of the most followed accounts from Gaza right now is an account called Eye on Palestine, and that account was shut down for days. And it was one of the primary ways that people were learning, particularly in the West, about what was happening. And so it's not just from people in the region. I see people every day who email me, who try to reach me and say, Shaun, my account has been closed, their account has been closed. And so it's extremely frustrating. I've been on Facebook and Instagram since those platforms were first created. And this company needs to understand just how vital it is in showing the world what's really going on in the region. I don't know that the world would understand a fraction of what's going on in Palestine if young Palestinians weren't able to document this with their phone and share these videos. So it's very important that Meta and Facebook and Instagram protect these journalists, that they stop censoring this content, and they need to understand that we're going to continue to share it, we're going to continue to tell these stories, and if they need to adjust their policies, that's what needs to happen. I do understand that this is a very difficult position for a social media company to be in. They have policies on showing violent videos, violent images, but they need to understand that we're not doing this to glorify it. We're doing this to document the pain and the suffering of Palestinian people. And so far, even though we have faced these warnings and restrictions, we're still here and we'll continue to push through.
سؤال أخير: هل لعبت دورا في إطلاق سراح رهينتين كانتا ضمن المحتجزين لدى حماس؟ هل هذا صحيح أم لا، وكيف؟
I'm glad you asked me that question. On October the 8th, a young man, a Jewish American named Ben Ronan, reached out to me on Instagram. First, he had commented on some posts that I had made. And then again on October 9th, he commented again saying that his sister, Natalie, had been abducted and that they believed that she was alive, but that there was a chance that she had been killed. And this young man, Ben, was her older brother. He lived outside of Chicago. And Ben reached out to me very publicly, and thousands of my followers saw when he first reached out to me. And he told me directly on Instagram, and we eventually texted, we talked. I communicated with this family probably 100 times over the course of almost 20 days. And her family told me that they had fought against police brutality in the United States. Natalie, who was a 17-year-old who had been taken into Gaza, her brother told me that Natalie had protested against the United States. And he told me that they were supporters of mine. And I had no plans on trying to help anybody that was being held hostage, not because I didn't care, but my assumption was that there were going to be hundreds of people fighting to get those men and women and children free. So I just really made the decision that I was going to focus primarily on helping Palestinians. But when this family reached out to me, they knew that I had a lot of friends in Gaza. I wanted to do anything I could to help this particular family. I shared Natalie's story and photos with probably 100 different people there in Gaza to just say, hey, this is a family that I know, and if she's alive, please let me know. And if she can be freed, please free her. And I learned over the course of those 2 weeks that there were dozens of people behind the scenes that were fighting to get her free, including multiple governments and other people. And when she was finally freed, I never said that she was freed just because of me, but that dozens of people and organizations and governments fought to have her free. Something really strange happened again. As soon as she was freed and I announced it, people started announcing from Israel that I was lying, that I never talked to her family, that I had nothing to do with it. And thankfully, I had saved all of my text messages. I even recorded all of my phone calls with this family. Even though it got really strange for me, it became an international news story, people saying that I made this whole thing up, which I clearly didn't. I don't regret doing it.
No.
My greatest fear was that the United States government was going to say that I was talking to Hamas and that I was going to be arrested for advocating. I didn't think that Israelis would fight against me after we fought to help free somebody that I thought they cared about. There's a hard point to make here. I'm not convinced at all that the Israeli government cares about anybody that's being held hostage in Gaza. In fact, we know, I saw a video just today of a young Israeli man who was killed by a bomb from Israel. And this was somebody that was being held safely. We believe that dozens of hostages have been killed from the airstrikes and bombs from Israel. I don't think they care to have these people freed at all. And over the past few weeks, even after all of the drama that I experienced trying to help free Natalie Ronan, the 17-year-old, I had a family come to me yesterday and say, Shaun, no one is helping us find our loved ones. Can you help? I've had 5 other families reach out to me and say, please, can you help us? Because they no longer believe that the Israeli government really cares to help. And so while the government continues to say that they are doing what they're doing because of the hostages, it's just not true. And anybody that understands, they've dropped over 10,000 bombs. If you actually cared about the safety and well-being of those men and women, you wouldn't drop those bombs that way. I don't know how many of them are even alive at this point. And so there was a question that was asked that I think may be the single most important question for any of us to consider. Would Israel or the United States or anyone else drop these bombs if they said Hamas was hiding in Israel? If Hamas was hiding in Israel, would Israel drop bombs on their own hospitals? Would they drop bombs on Israelis' homes? If Hamas was hiding in the United States, would the United States drop bombs on schools, churches, mosques? If Hamas was hiding anywhere else in the world, would they be willing to murder 5,000 children, to destroy 250,000 homes? What we see here is that in the eyes, particularly of the United States and Israel, that they treat Palestinian lives like they don't matter. There was a phrase that we said here in the United States, we say Black Lives Matter. And that's because we are fighting for the safety and security of African Americans here in the United States. So we say, hey, Black lives matter. My question to the United States is, why do you act like Palestinian lives don't matter? And what we know is that Israel and the United States and anybody else who is supporting these actions, they would never do this if people that they loved or cared about were being harmed in this way. And all we can do is to continue to fight for the safety, the security, the freedom of Palestinian people. I believe we have rough days ahead of us, but we can't lose hope. And my prayer is that the government of Jordan, other governments in the region, that they would do anything they can to help Palestinians and to stop this and to continue to fight for their safety and freedom.
شون كينج، أشكرك جزيل الشكر على وجودك معنا هذه الليلة، وأشكرك شخصيا على حضورك معنا وعلى حديثك واختيارك لنبض بلد ورؤية لتوجيه هذه الرسائل. أشكرك كل الشكر شون. مشاهدينا، يمكنكم مشاهدة تعليق كاملا عبر يوتيوب والاستماع لهذا الحوار عبر رؤيا ويفز. إلى هنا وصلنا لختام حلقة الليلة، تصبحون على خير.